Hey everyone. So, Mom has a problem. It's not a big problem, but it's a problem. You might say it's a preference issue, right? This is my preference, and it's going to sound paradoxical from what I'm about to say, but I think that my preference has a utility to it, which is why I'm sharing it with you. I am not thrilled with a trend I'm noticing in discussions. Whether it's a person who really needs to assert that they like this particular anime, or somebody who's really into this band, or somebody who has this really big hard-on for this political thing. I think we need to start realizing that preferences as a concept aren't that deep. Now, I want to clarify some things before we go into this. The first is that when it comes to pronouns, those aren't preferred, those are mandatory at gunpoint. So the idea is that when I say preferences, I mean opinions about various different things. The opinions we have towards things that we attach to and then end up either beating ourselves up for or beating other people up for emotionally or physically. I suppose that could happen. The other thing I want to make very clear is that when I say preferences, I'm not saying that you have to abandon them entirely. I'm not asking everyone to be a Buddhist monk. I did that for a while. It was boring. So I'm not in any way saying that you have to not have preferences. What I'm saying is that we need to stop taking the goddamn thing so fucking seriously. There's a way in which people attach their sense of self to their preferences. And what happens from that is that when someone shares something different, they get upset. They get bothered. Oh, you don't like that thing as much as me. I like cute girls as anime statues. Not everyone likes that. Right? Some people really, really dig video games. Other people don't.
Some people have a favorite Linux distribution, and others don't.
While yes, in many cases, especially in certain arguments, I will feign irritation, if not outright indignance for what I consider to be dumb perspectives, in the real end, I don't care. You're allowed to like what you like. You're allowed to have whatever preferences you want, but that doesn't mean that those preferences are these huge things. All preferences are is simply that. You prefer one thing over another. It's just the ego choosing this, light over dark, black over white, peanut butter over jelly. For example, Vosh doesn't like the MCU, or at least gives it a lot of shit. I think Vosh is an idiot in this regard. Do I think he's an idiot in all things? No. I like his political prescriptions. I think he's genuinely a pretty cool guy. Do I like the way he talks about movies? Not so much. We have different tastes. I like the MCU. I like feeling cool heroic things. I like that swell of music. Sorry, I'm a fucking geek. I am a geeky girl and I like that stuff. Sorry.
There's a member of our community that is very clear that Belgian beer is their preference. Is a very big, big preference. So, you know.
My concern here is that I want you guys to sort of, in your mind, step back and just notice what a preference is. A preference is nothing more than just the mind sort of going towards one direction and the other. And the problem is a lot of people don't interrogate those preferences. They don't actually in any way ask themselves why. Why do you like those things? Why does that thing call to you? Right? We have people in chat saying they like beer. I loathe beer. The more fruity and brightly colored my drink is, and the more alcohol it has in it, the better. I want to get wasted on one fishbowl. Thank you. But you're allowed to like beer. I think it's gross and tastes like piss. But I like my gay drinks. We're different in that regard. But this is the thing. As much as I performatively give shit about the Kong versus Godzilla takes, or, you know, the new Riddler thing, I don't really care in the sense of these things matter in the world at large. You're allowed to like what you like. This is why I don't give a lot of people shit about certain media. I just don't give a shit. I care about real harm in the world. You liking something that's potentially problematic. Like we talked about earlier in the stream, that won't be a segment. We talked about earlier the lead singer of MSI getting in trouble for some things. You can go figure that out yourself. But if you choose to keep listening to that band, I don't care. If you've already bought their albums or you're just listening to them on YouTube, you're not really doing anything beyond giving them maybe a tiny bit of ad revenue. Or you have premium and you just do anyway. Like the system is sort of rigged in a way where unless you completely cut off from a thing, you don't really have the ability to affect it. And to be honest, I don't care. I don't care if you still like Marilyn Manson. I still like Marilyn Manson despite the horrible things he's done. I like a lot of his music. Does that mean I can't get that shit out of my head now that I know things? No, but it also means that like I can try to separate those things when possible. I don't really feel comfortable watching Harry Potter anymore, but that's because, you know, it would be like watching Birth of a Nation for a black person. Like, it feels weird now. Although Birth of a Nation was directly racist, well, nothing in Harry Potter is overtly transphobic. Again, other than the lack of trans people and, well, a lot of really racist... Anyway, continuing.
You know, there's still a matter of preferences, right? Like, there's still... I still, like, have a lot of my Slytherin stuff because I am massively ambitious, and while that part of me still connects with that, I wish I had more spaces to wear that too, where I didn't have to keep the caveat of, no, really, like, I'm also trans, and, like, I get that crawling is a not great, but, you know, I grew up on this thing. So, you know, preferences. But
so my point with all this is that as far as the preferences, here's the thing that I want you guys to kind of take from this. I think a preference only really truly matters when it either has the potential of creating harm and you have to demonstrate that harm, or that preference has utility. I have a preference that people should in some way interrogate their preferences and not take them quite as seriously. Unless, of course, the previous two things are stated, that there's a preference that they see that does harm. Like if you're still really an avid R. Kelly fan, yeah, that's probably weird. Or if it brings utility, like the one I'm offering now. This is my preference. I would prefer people not get stuck on this stuff and act in ways that are really strange. People divide up in the weirdest ways over the smallest little differences. When there are very large things going on in the world, there are things that actually matter. There's a reason I don't follow Gammy on Twitter. Well, because Gammy is an awful person. That's my preference. I don't prefer to follow that person. But you know what? That preference has utility because I think seeing her garbage takes and her incredibly weird version of trans acceptance that comes from TTTT is basically just bad for my mental health. It does active harm to me. And yes, no one follows her on Twitter. You're correct, Gayfesh, because she's gone. She was suspended. But it's one of the reasons why, despite the fact that we sort of love our blocks and we like blocking people we don't like on Twitter, as much as I play in that game myself, the reality is I'll block people all the time. I have mega block. I've blocked tons of people. I mute people now so they can scream into the void. Like, yeah, that's a thing. Why? Because I prefer not to see their stuff. I just don't. I don't even see things for people I don't follow. Sorry, I'll check into things occasionally, but sometimes you'll just see some weird transphobic stuff down there, and it's going to happen as we get bigger. My preference is to not have to deal with that stuff because I like my mental health. To me, that preference has utility. I want you guys to think about this because there's a way in which people attach to these things and then it creates suffering. And so let me outline that real quick. When I say suffering, I mean in the Buddhist sense. Now, you don't have to believe in Buddhism. You don't give a fuck. He's an old guy from like a couple thousand years ago. Whatever, he died. He was a prince that decided to be a monk. Big fucking deal. But here's the thing. There's some useful wisdom there. To me, there is a difference between suffering and pain. Pain is easy. Being sick, getting old, dying. watching the people around you get old and die. All of those things. Oh, Hannah, thank you so much for the tier 1 subscription. All of those things are pain. They suck. They're happening. Ouch. The loss of a lover. Ouch. Your polycule detonating. Ouch. These are real pain. Suffering, on the other hand, is when we argue with reality. And Hannah, remind me on the Discord in the Talk to Mods thing so I can fix it so you have the patron stuff here too. Suffering is when you argue with reality. I'll give you an example. There's a lot of activists who would prefer the world be socialist or more ecologically balanced or all these things. And I agree with those preferences. I also think that sometimes the activist brain goes insane and does some really dumb crap. A good example of this is people who just deny the way the world works. You'll see this with tankies, or you'll see this with other groups in the far left and the far right, where they don't really understand the way the world works now. They just deny it and want to push towards some, masturbatory fantasy they have of what they want in the world, with no idea of what actually exists or what actually is. We say this in the whole joke of touch grass, but here's the reality. These people are suffering. They're suffering because they don't actually engage with reality. To change the world, and here's the hot take that no one's gonna like, it's perfectly okay to want to change the world, but you still have to accept it the way it is. Accept does not mean be okay with. Accept does not mean it has to be part of your preferences. Accept does not mean justify it or minimize it. It just means accept at a passive level. Understanding very clearly, here's how the world is. Here's how we change it. We have to understand it to change it. But if you just sit there and live in fantasy, that's why we make fun of communists, right? Like, I could damn well be called a communist, but people who live in theory and don't understand the way the world works, they just want to put all the libs against the wall. Guess what? Unless those people get power, they are never going to affect any real change. They are meaningless. Right? Because the world they want to live in, they don't even know how to start at square one. This is one of the major things we talk about on this channel. Mental health is political. There are political aspects in it. Money from politics comes into mental health. Your county in your state can change whether or not you have a functioning community mental health.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Your therapist helping you get HRT can be entirely based on their politics. Thus, the preference of not having a therapist who is a Trump supporter is a pretty good preference because it has a utility. It means I'm not working with someone who actively votes against my best interest.
Can I have the gobbo?
You can have a gobo.
Thanks.
There you go. I need you guys to understand something very clear. Your preferences are okay. You're allowed to like what you like. Unless someone can demonstrate to me that thing does harm, and you know the things I'm talking about, the ones that actually do fucking harm. Obscenity and awful shit that I'm not going to get into here.
Not safe for life content, right? Making fun of people.
But if we treat like every person who likes anime that same way, like, yeah, are there some anime that are really cringe and kind of questionable? Sure. Does that mean that that person's a bad person? No, you can't demonstrate that. You just go by your judgments based on a preference of you not liking the thing.
Well, and again, we judge harm, right, by the actual, like, tangible actions, not the hypotheticals, okay? Which we will get into later, but is there actual tangible, like, repercussions of a thing? I had 2 points on this if you...
Yeah, I was also going to ask, do we want to just wrap the preference thing into this? Because or not the preference thing, but the hypothetical thing in this? Because we could.
That is a slightly different segment.
Okay.
So we'll wrap into that next.
Okay.
So by the way, if you are watching this as a video, we will have another one about hypotheticals. Okay. So with preferences, I think it's important to remember that, like, one of the things to watch out for is preferences about, like, people. Okay. Let's say somebody's like uses like and it's really hard to, and you're like, I hate this. Well, okay, but is that actually a problem? Like, are they actually doing anything? Or if somebody's voice is just not meshing, right? You just find it grating. Well, that's a preference, but that doesn't mean that we should treat them differently. And I think we gotta be really careful to make sure that our preferences are not also like leading to us doing actions that are causing harm in that situation, like kind of cutting these people off. Because I think I've seen that a lot with, groups or like really toxic groups, right? Mm-hmm. If they're like somebody's not really like following or somebody's not like getting all the social cues, there's a tendency to kind of cut them out. And that's a big one. And the other caveat I have with this is doing a check on yourself and going, okay, is this preference a legitimate preference? Is this something more? Sorry, brain hurt. Wow, I'm really rough. With chronic illness and migraines, there are things that for me are not a preference. If somebody has loud music playing next to me, that is not a preference. That is my brain will explode and I need to take medication because I am having a medical emergency right now and need to handle the migraine. Okay? That's not the same as a preference that the music would be quieter. All right? I do my best to do the internal checks to make sure that, like, okay, if the music's just loud, I can kind of deal with it okay. When there's bass and stuff coming on, no, that's going to cause problems for me. And I have to deal with those things. But I think it's important, especially when anyone that deals with, chronic illness or any kind of disability, to do those internal checks of, okay, what is this thing for me? And same thing when we, are around people that deal with those issues too, right? Am I having a judgment or a preference come up, or am I having, or is there something else going on here, right? So.
Yeah, I just think the thing I want to make everyone very clear about is that when your preference, when the direction you want to go with the thing is so, when you're so attached to this that it starts causing you internal distress, that's a problem. And so I just want you guys to look for this and watch it for your inner selves, because if someone's actually doing harm, or if something legitimately has utility, cool, argue for it, do it. But if it's just vanilla over chocolate, kink over not kink, why are we getting into this? Are we using our time effectively? There was a discussion last night with one of my dear friends who I really like a lot, but we had a little bit of a difference of opinion. And my experience of that, they may say differently, was that there was a joke about libs, and I'll agree, liberals bother me. They do some dumb crap, and sometimes they don't know what the fuck they're on about. But I do think sometimes the online left, and this is my preference, I would prefer if people didn't talk as much shit about them, because the problem is that tends to lead to negative outcomes. That is, the people that we can most easily pull from, who have the least amount of baggage, i.e. they're not former Nazis or former conservatives, get alienated because of that stuff. And I feel like this constant sort of ribbing and making fun of liberals, it's very hard to distinguish it from legitimate critiques versus shit tankies say. This person, here's the thing, my friend disagreed, and that's okay. We're still friends. We just have a difference of how this view, and we came to some kind of consensus, but the consensus was still us being on a little bit different sides of this. I have a preference one way, they have a preference another, but that's okay. Right? I just want you to think about this and notice this for yourselves. Does that make sense? That good?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Awesome, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.
If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Also, consider donating to us. You can support us on our website, transgirltherapist.org. You can also help us on our Patreon, link below, or you can become a member here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching.